All right, I'm going to review my experience for the month of March with my reading challenge. Altogether, I read 19 books. I know it was supposed to be 20 books, but this one right here, the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, I super abridged read it, just looking over it briefly. So actually, I read 19 books, and I changed it around because one of my books I ordered off Amazon. It did not ship Prime. It did not come until April 2nd. So in replacement of that, I read 13 Days by Robert F. Kennedy. It's a memoir of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Super short book. I ended up reading it in like 2 or 3 hours. So that was actually kind of nice because my last day, I could just take it easy. Read that real quick. So I guess I'll go through all these books briefly and say what I thought of them. No particular order because I just piled them up here whenever I finished them. So we'll start here. 13 Days by Robert F. Kennedy is pretty good. Written well, is short. They had some extra documents and a foreword by Robert McNamara and a former British Prime Minister. This one, it's good. I'm definitely going to look at this later on in the future. Very thorough. I believe Cambridge, they have another dictionary of philosophy. I never looked at it, but I believe it's somewhat on parity with this. Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes and Eric M. Conway is pretty interesting. Had a liberal bent to it. They talk about conflicting scientific views with things like cigarette smoking, global warming, holes in the ozone layer. So it has a pro, which you'd typically say like liberal viewpoint on that. Whether the science is accurate or not, I don't know. Never really looked that into it. Where Did I Leave My Glasses? Good. Little older, I believe it was from the 90s or early 2000s, about memory loss and age-related cognitive deficits. Nigel Warburton's Philosophy of the Basics. Yeah, I thought it was good. Written in layman's terms, which is nice, especially for me. Somewhat short. I enjoyed it. Stephen King's Cujo, typical Stephen King book. Liked it. Not as much as some of his other books, but still not bad. Should We Eat Meat? This might be my favorite book that I read. Very unbiased view of should we eat meat, and also about the environmental impacts and the moral impacts, too, of eating meat. Working in a Very Small Place. Pretty good book. It's basically a memoir about a neurosurgeon, but they also talk about the career and also the crazy attention to detail that neurosurgeons need to have. Good book. This Man Jesus, a Christology book about Jesus, is all right, but, you know, from a historic philosophical standpoint, it's kind of hard to, like, pigeonhole Jesus, so ran around in circles a lot, but it was an all right book. Faith Meets Fame. These are excerpts from famous people in the entertainment industry talking about their faith and how it helped them through their personal and career struggles. Not bad. How to Lie with Statistics. It was all right. It was almost so basic, it almost insults your intelligence. But it was a short book. It was easy to read, and so, you know, that made it a little bit better. Not too much pain. Inspired by Kelly Clark. A memoir about Kelly Clark, the Olympic snowboarder. Thought it was pretty good. Talked about her, what motivates her, her philosophy on life. Pretty good. Bodie Miller, same thing, but with Bodie Miller. He's an interesting character. So because of that, it was definitely a good read. What If? This is another one of my top books that I read this month. Really great. It was just a bunch of hypothetical scenarios, and like the name says, what if? I'm not going to explain it. You can look at the video explaining What If and my critique on it. But yeah, good book. Walk in the Woods. It's about the Appalachian Trail. I enjoyed it. Very well written. The author, very good writer. Poetry for Dummies. It's more of like a reference book, but I still enjoyed it. I'm kind of weird. I like poetry. So, pretty good. They talk about the different forms of poetry, different metrics, prosody. Pretty good. Practice of Poetry. Not as good. It's more of like a teaching reference. And the last one I have is Business Adventures. Talks about different like little fiascos that happen on Wall Street. They talk about like Ford's Edsel. They also talk about like a crisis that happened, I believe, in the 1960s with the British pound. So anyways, those were the books I read. Overall, I thought it was interesting, incredibly time-consuming. You know, not that I have a lot of responsibility or, you know, other things that I need to do, but it still took up a lot of time, so I found that difficult with the reading challenge. You know, it also gets really tedious. Like, I noticed a lot of times, like, I'd be reading but not really understanding, and I always had to, like, come back to focus. And even still, like, it just didn't become enjoyable after a while. But, you know, if I, like, stopped for the day, then I picked up again the next day. Usually my mind was refreshed enough to keep on going. Oh, yeah, I forgot another book, The Seance. It's a novel. It's like a historical ghost novel. That was another book I read. I lent it to someone, so it's not in the pile. But anyways, going back to the review of my challenge. So yeah, another weird thing that happened was I'd be reading and like a few times like I'd start seeing spots. And I think it's just because I was reading so much and, you know, not to sound funny, but the words were burning on my retina. Yeah, kind of weird, but so yeah, it's kind of tedious. I learned some new things, which was cool. So yeah, that's my review of my challenge, and I am signing off.